Hello and welcome to The View from ADB. We are in Frankfurt for the Asian Development Bank annual meeting, and today I'm joined by Bambang Brodjonegoro, Minister of Finance for Indonesia. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Minister, of course, 2015 was a really tough year for some emerging markets. In Indonesia's case, the currency floored versus the US dollar. It reached something like 17-year lows last year. There have also been heavy capital outflows as well as drops in foreign exchange reserves. This year the situation seems to be rosier. What kind of policy actions did the Ministry of Finance undertake, maybe also in conjunction with the central bank?
Yes, of course, we understood what happened in 2015 was basically the impact of the low commodity price that has been the main backbone of our economic growth in the past. So when things happen, I mean the commodity price becomes low, and then at the same time there is uncertainty from the Federal Reserve regarding Fed rate hike. Basically, what both, I mean, Ministry of Finance as a fiscal authority and central bank as the monetary authority put the macroeconomic stabilization as the first priority. So of course, at that time, we cannot think too much about the growth. So we really focus on the maintaining the stability. From central bank, of course, they do their exchange rate policy, trying to make sure the exchange rate is basically the buffer, for up and down in the market. And then in terms of the capital flow, of course, at the same time we witness the capital outflow. But at the same time, from the government side, we have done our best in terms of attracting the inflow, instead, especially for the government bond. So we are trying to do focusing on the stability. And of course, stability itself will not lead too much on the growth. So from us, what we did is, after we eliminate the fuel subsidy at the end of 2014, we had some fiscal space in 2015. And we utilize really the fiscal space for two things: for increasing the capital expenditure and to improve social protection. So as a result, at least, we have some growth created from the government spending and government investment. And then with the social protection goal, we also been able to maintain the purchasing power. So the consumption growth has been quite stable in 2015. And don't forget one thing, both central bank and government trying to work hand in hand to maintain the inflation at relatively low level. So at the end of the year, we had inflation only 3.3%, which really helped in terms of maintaining purchasing power, maintaining the stability, and at the end creating the economic growth.
And I think another big point for Indonesia in light of falling commodity prices has also been trying to diversify its economy more. It is heavily reliant on the oil and gas sector. Yeah. You made a very interesting comment a few moments ago at one of the seminars saying that, yes, diversification is underway and it is on your agenda, but what people should also focus on is the timing and keeping the momentum of diversification policies alive even when things are going very well. Would you agree, and how has Indonesia done this?
Yes. Of course, we learn from the past, and of course, in the past there were some good policies as well as bad policies or bad implementation. So what we learned in the past, when we have been able successfully, to transform the economy from the reliance at that time to oil and gas to more on the manufacturing sector, we also understood that it didn't last long, because once we have the Asian financial collapse, and then after that we had the start of commodity price booming, especially with the QE policy in the US, then suddenly the continuation of the structural reform somehow is disappeared.
The push was not as hard.
Yeah, disappeared, or people simply forget that they should continue industrialization, but what happened is deindustrialization, the reduction of the share of the manufacturing to the GDP. So for the future, after we learn hard from the experience of the low commodity price, in this time coal, oil and gas as well, and mining product as well as plantation product, then what we need to do is to come up with something that is more structural, and more importantly, it has to be more sustainable and with continuation. So the first step that government took in September 2015, coming up with policy packages. And the packages basically talking about two things. First, maintaining the purchasing power. So make sure that whenever we do the reform, and everybody agrees that reform sometimes is painful, we have to make sure this, poor people especially, will not be affected too much by the implementation of the reform itself. So purchasing power, maintaining purchasing power is very important. The other part of the package is basically talking about improving the investment climate. And we know that we cannot just simply, okay, why don't we focus on manufacturing and everything will work that way. I think to make it more sustainable, we have to make sure the business environment in Asia is really friendly to any investor in your priority sector. It could be manufacturing, it could be infrastructure, it could be on services like tourism. So it means when you're talking about licensing process, it has to be smooth and quick, And then when you're talking about getting the land right acquisition, it has to be smooth and fast.
And since September 2015, Indonesia has also been pushing new fiscal stimulus packages to try and revive the economy.
Yeah.
In this scenario, is it going to be possible to hit the 1% of GDP budget deficit target for 2019?
Oh, 1%?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, of course, when you're talking about deficit, you're talking about, the difference between the revenue and the spending. Of course, with the absence of the high commodity price that usually contributes to the high economic growth, then we need to push a little bit the government spending, to produce the economic growth itself. So it means we need to run a little bit higher budget deficit. But once you can solve the problem on the revenue side, I think it will help, as you mentioned, on the spending side, we still keep expanding. But on the revenue side, we got some kind of new source of revenue that will match the needs of the expansion of the spending. So at the end, the deficit could be reduced. Doesn't have to be close to 3% like our limit in terms of legislation, but could be lower than 2%. It could be toward 1%. But again, it's not just the expansion of spending, but it's more important is improving the revenue side.
And lastly, I saw that you recently mentioned that, for example, on the funding side, there might be an idea for Indonesia to print a panda bond, which other sovereigns in Asia have been doing recently. Yeah. So the sector is booming. Is this something that could happen in the short term?
Well, we are still doing in-depth study about the possibility. Of course, we need to find out about the potential investors. We need to find out about the regulation regarding the bond itself. So currently, we are still focusing on our so-called traditional bonds. I mean, traditional foreign currency bond like the US dollar, Sukuk US dollar, and then euro and samurai bond, yen. For additional or new type of bonds, maybe not in this year, but because we still focus on what we have right now, and we want still to do the in-depth study about the liquidity and all the market aspect of the panda bond.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with all your projects.
Okay, thank you very much.